The Last Stand of Britain, the summer of 1940. The map of Europe told a grim story. Adolf Hitler, the German dictator, had swallowed nation after nation: Austria, Poland, Norway, Denmark, Belgium, and even mighty France had fallen under the Reich's crushing advance. In the south, his ally, Benito Mussolini of Italy, joined the burgeoning Axis alliance. With the Soviet Union bound by a non-aggression pact, Hitler had no threat from the east. The United States remained isolated, reluctant to join the conflict. This left a single, solitary nation standing against the Nazi machine: Great Britain. Hitler assumed the fighting was over. Surely, the British Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, would sue for peace rather than risk the utter destruction of his island nation. He was wrong. Churchill delivered an iconic and defiant message that echoed around the world: "We shall never surrender." The war would continue. This declaration meant the invasion of Britain was inevitable. Hitler devised Operation Sea Lion. A ground invasion was impossible across the English Channel, and the German Navy was no match for the mighty British Royal Navy. The path to victory had to be through the air. The German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, boasted 2,600 aircraft, dwarfing Britain's 700. Beginning in July 1940, the Luftwaffe unleashed a campaign of terror known as the Battle of Britain. Their initial goal was to eliminate airfields, manufacturing plants, and the Royal Air Force, RAF. Against overwhelming odds, the RAF pilots fought bravely. The scale soon escalated. On August 24, 1940, German pilots mistakenly bombed London. Churchill retaliated with strikes on Berlin. Enraged, Hitler turned his fury directly on the British capital. On September 15, 1940, Hitler ordered an all-out decisive strike, sending over 1,000 aircraft, 620 fighters, and 500 bombers to break the British resolve. What followed was a historic dogfight in the skies. Outnumbered, the RAF shot down over 60 Luftwaffe planes while losing only 29. This day became known as Battle of Britain Day. It was Hitler's first major setback, a powerful demonstration of the motivating difference between an invading force and a defending one. A lesson repeated decades later in the early days of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Operation Sea Lion was postponed indefinitely. Hitler had been defeated. The fatal turn: invasion of the Soviet Union. After failing to subdue Britain, Hitler's attention turned east, settling on his ideological enemy, the Soviet Union. Despite the peace treaty, Hitler despised the communists and harbored a megalomaniacal vision of carving out a vast German empire in the east. In April 1941, the Axis powers, Germany, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria, had already tightened their grip on Eastern Europe, even capturing Yugoslavia and Greece to bail out Mussolini's struggling forces. Hitler believed a quick strike against the Soviets would bring Britain to the peace table out of sheer terror. His plan was simple. The blitzkrieg strategy that crushed France would be repeated, dividing his forces into three massive prongs aimed at Leningrad, Moscow, and the southern Soviet heartland via Ukraine. On June 22, 1941, Operation Barbarossa began. Though the Soviet army boasted a massive 20,000 tanks compared to Germany's 6,000, superior German technology and organization initially gave the advantage to the invaders. The Soviets, led by Stalin, immediately joined the Allied powers, with Britain securing a vital supply route through Iran. The Germans plunged 100 kilometers into Soviet territory in just 2 days. Within weeks, they were only 300 kilometers from Moscow. However, crucial disagreements among German commanders led to a delay in the final advance until October. This delay brought two catastrophic forces into play: the Russian winter and the Soviet reserves. Soviet troops, previously tied up on the Japanese border due to a non-aggression treaty, were freed up to rush west and defend the capital. The Americans joined the fight. In December 1941, the war dramatically expanded. Without warning or provocation, Japan attacked the American naval base at Pearl Harbor. Over 2,300 American troops were killed. The United States, having resisted involvement in the European conflict, now had no choice. President Roosevelt declared war on Japan and officially joined the Allied powers, which now included the UK, the Soviet Union, and China. By mid-1942, Hitler shifted his focus south in the Soviet Union to cut off the Allied supply line running through Iran. A monstrous conflict erupted in the city of Stalingrad. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, the tide turned against Japan at the Battle of Midway, where the U.S. Navy destroyed 4 critical Japanese aircraft carriers, marking a pivotal moment toward American naval superiority. By the end of 1942, the British also managed to push the combined Italian and German forces out of Egypt. The Battle of Stalingrad became the deadliest battle of the entire war. The fighting continued through the brutal winter of 1942. Despite having nearly taken the city, the German Sixth Army was eventually encircled by the relentless Soviet soldiers. In February 1943, roughly 300,000 German troops surrendered. It was the single biggest turning point of the Second World War. The final push, following the disaster at Stalingrad, the Axis began to crumble. In July 1943, the Italian people, weary of war, rose up against Mussolini, who was eventually captured and killed by civilian partisans. The new Italian government promptly ended the war with the Allies. Allied confidence surged. Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin met in Tehran in November 1943 to coordinate their strategy to finally defeat Hitler. The ultimate invasion came on June 6, 1944. D-Day. Over 150,000 British, Canadian, and American troops landed on the beaches of Normandy in France, establishing a massive ground front in Western Europe for the first time since the evacuation of Dunkirk. The Western Allies began the long, hard fight to liberate France. Hitler was forced to pull troops from the Eastern Front to counter the invasion. This proved fatal. The Soviet army launched a massive counterattack, recovering over 600 kilometers of territory in just 2 months. Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and Romania soon fell under Soviet occupation. Hitler's final, desperate attempt to break the Allied advance was the Battle of the Bulge in the Ardennes forest, but it failed. In the final months, the Allies learned the horrific truth of the concentration camps, where millions of innocent Jews and others had been systematically murdered. The Allied forces continued relentless aerial bombings on German cities, completely destroying places like Dresden. In May 1945, the Soviet army encircled Berlin. Just 2 days earlier, on April 30th, 1945, Adolf Hitler committed suicide in his bunker. On May 8th, 1945, Germany formally surrendered. World War II in Europe was finally over. The map of the continent was redrawn. creating East and West Germany and new borders that defined modern Europe. The war led directly to the creation of the United Nations and other global institutions like NATO, meant to ensure such a catastrophe would never happen again.